Right, so get ready, because we are diving deep into a case that is, well, it's fascinating and deeply unsettling. We're looking at the death of Phoebe Handsjuk in Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah. And on the surface, it might seem like just a straightforward suicide, right?
Right.
Young woman found at the bottom of a garbage chute. Case closed. But
Hmm.
we're going to dig into all these sources you've given us, and I think you'll see why this case has sparked so much debate. And there are just so many unanswered questions.
Yeah, what's really intriguing is how, like, the initial simplicity of it, kind of unravels the more you look into it. You
Yep.
have, like, this seemingly straightforward scenario, but then, like, as you mentioned, the details, they just don't quite add up.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
So to understand the complexities, we need to understand Phoebe, right? She was 24 at the time, described as creative, empathetic, but also battling anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
It's like this, she had this vibrant energy, but also carrying just like a heavy weight. That's so important because understanding her state of mind is absolutely crucial when analyzing the events that led up to her death.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it's a reminder that there's often a lot going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to add another layer to this, Phoebe was in a relationship with Anthony Hampel, a successful events promoter.
Right.
Nearly twice her age.
Okay.
And their relationship was passionate, but, friends and family noted it was kind of a volatile dynamic.
Yeah.
With some hints of Anthony being,
Well,
controlling.
that age gap definitely raises questions, doesn't it? About
Yeah.
the power dynamic
Oh, yeah.
in their relationship.
Absolutely.
You have to consider the potential for manipulation or coercion, especially given Phoebe's, vulnerability at the time.
And you have to keep that context in mind because in the weeks before her death, Phoebe just seemed to be struggling even more.
Yeah.
She had moved into Anthony's luxury apartment
Okay.
in Melbourne's Balença building,
Mm-hmm.
but it just doesn't sound like it was a happy situation at all.
You're right.
And then on December 2nd, 2010,
Mm-hmm.
she's found dead
Wow.
at the bottom of the garbage chute
Oh, my God.
in that very building.
And that's where things get a little, that's where the first alarm bells start to go off.
Yeah.
Just the image of her body, like in the trash compactor room, surrounded by glass and blood.
Horrible.
It's a horrific scene and immediately sparks questions.
It's hard to imagine how anyone could end up in a garbage chute accidentally.
Right.
Right. So police initially theorized that she climbed in and fell 40 meters.
Okay.
But the chute itself, think about this. It had this small opening about a meter off the ground with a heavy spring-loaded door.
So you're saying to get into that chute,
Yeah.
you would have to be
Incredibly determined.
really determined,
Yeah.
almost like contorting yourself to fit.
Yeah, and in a distressed state.
Right.
Could someone really manage that?
It just doesn't seem likely.
No, and then there's the blood trail.
Okay.
Investigators found, traces of blood leading from the living room to the garbage chute.
Oh,
Initially, it was dismissed, but for Phoebe's family, this was a huge red flag
of course.
because it suggests something happened before she reached the chute.
You see, in cases like this, blood spatter analysis is so crucial.
Right.
The direction and the pattern of the blood
Mm-hmm.
could tell us, was there a struggle? Was she injured elsewhere? Was she even conscious at the time?
It just doesn't fit with the climbed in and fell narrative.
Totally.
And then you have the injuries.
Okay.
Severe damage to her head and legs.
Hmm.
But her hands and arms were relatively unscathed.
Oh, interesting.
So if she went in feet first,
Right.
wouldn't you expect to see defensive wounds?
Yeah.
Some sign of her trying to, break the fall.
It's a very valid point.
Yeah.
The nature and the distribution of her injuries seem more consistent with a high-impact collision,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily a controlled descent. So it begs the question, was she already unconscious or incapacitated before entering the chute?
Which leads us to the investigation and Anthony's account of that night.
Okay.
He claimed he was at work when Phoebe died, came home to an empty apartment, and cooperated fully with the police.
While an alibi is important, it doesn't automatically rule out other possibilities.
Right.
And that's where the timeline becomes so crucial.
Yeah.
Were there any gaps?
Yeah.
Did investigators thoroughly examine his movements that night?
Mm-hmm.
These are all questions that need to be addressed.
For sure. And then there's Anthony's portrayal of Phoebe.
Right.
He kind of painted this picture of a fragile woman, heavily intoxicated the night before,
Mm-hmm.
with a history of self-harm.
Okay.
It's a narrative that, certainly fits a certain mold, but doesn't tell the whole story.
It's a classic case of needing to separate, fact from interpretation.
Yeah.
Did Phoebe have her struggles? Absolutely.
Right.
But did those struggles inevitably lead to her death in this specific way? That's what we need to unpack.
Exactly, especially because Phoebe's mother, Natalie,
Right.
completely rejected that portrayal of her daughter.
Really?
Yeah, she acknowledged Ceedy's challenges, but she never believed that she would take her own life,
Wow.
especially in such a bizarre and seemingly impossible way.
The clash between those two perspectives, Anthony's and Natalie's, is what makes this case so compelling.
Yeah.
It forces us to consider the possibility of conflicting narratives
Well, for sure.
and whose voice is being prioritized.
Absolutely. And Natalie's refusal to accept those easy answers is what kept this case from being swept under the rug. It was her relentless pressure that led to a coroner's inquest 3 years after Phoebe's death.
And that inquest brought to light some very disturbing details.
Yeah.
Details that only deepened the mystery surrounding Phoebe's death.
So one of the most chilling details that came out of the inquest was this text message that Phoebe sent to her mother just hours before her death.
Oh, wow.
The message simply read, "I love you, Mom. I'm sorry."
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
It really makes you wonder, like, what was Phoebe apologizing for?
Yeah.
Was it a cry for help?
Right.
A premonition of what was to come?
Yeah, it's just this haunting detail
Right.
that adds another layer to this already complex puzzle.
Yeah.
The inquest also revealed that Phoebe's blood alcohol content at the time of her death was 0.16.
Okay.
That's 3 times the legal limit for driving.
Wow. That's significant.
It means she was heavily intoxicated,
Right.
which, could explain impaired judgment. Maybe
Yeah.
she wasn't thinking clearly.
Sure.
But it still doesn't answer the question of how she physically got into that chute.
Right.
Or explain the inconsistencies we see with her injuries.
Ex-
And ultimately, despite all the evidence and unanswered questions, the coroner ruled Phoebe's death a misadventure. They suggested she climbed into the chute while intoxicated and just fell to her death accidentally.
It's a ruling that left a lot of people, especially Phoebe's family, feeling like justice hadn't been served. They felt like the coroner's findings failed to address, adequately the many inconsistencies and unanswered questions.
Yeah, and it's easy to see why.
Absolutely.
We still don't know how she got into the chute, if she was conscious at the time,
Right.
or if someone else was even involved.
Yeah. And to add to the frustration, there's the issue of the missing CCTV footage.
This is huge.
Huge.
The Valencia building had security cameras,
Right.
but there was no footage of Phoebe entering the chute area.
Wow.
That's crucial evidence that could have provided valuable insights into her final moments.
Right. It's like a key piece of the puzzle is missing.
Yeah.
So it makes it even more difficult to see the full picture.
So we're left with this image, right, of this young woman struggling with her mental health
Right.
in this complex relationship, found dead under very suspicious circumstances,
Yeah.
and an official explanation that just doesn't quite add up.
And at the center of it all
Yeah.
is Phoebe's mother, Natalie. She refused to accept the coroner's ruling and has become like a tireless advocate, determined to, uncover the truth about what happened to her daughter.
It's really her tenacity that's kept this case in the public eye.
Wow.
And, her story is a reminder that sometimes the official version of events
Right.
isn't the whole story.
Of course.
And it takes the unwavering dedication of those who loved the victim to keep pushing for answers.
It's a testament to the power of a mother's love.
Yeah.
And the importance of, challenging assumptions, even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
Now, one theory that's been explored is that Phoebe may have been unconscious or incapacitated before being placed in the chute.
That's a disturbing thought.
It is.
But it would explain some of the inconsistencies that we've discussed.
Right.
Like the lack of defensive wounds, the blood trail leading to the chute, and the difficulty of getting into the chute itself.
Yeah.
It raises a chilling possibility that we can't ignore. Could someone have been involved in Phoebe's death?
Yeah.
Was there a struggle?
Right.
A cover-up? These are questions that continue to haunt this case.
It's like we're looking at a puzzle with these missing pieces, right? We have these fragments of information, but without the full picture, it's just impossible to say for certain what happened that night in the Valencia building.
And that's what makes this case so compelling.
It is.
It challenges us to think critically, to question the official narrative, and to consider all possibilities, no matter how uncomfortable they might be.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most baffling mysteries are the ones that are closest to home. Hidden in plain sight, shrouded in unanswered questions and conflicting narratives.
And while we may never know definitively what happened to Phoebe,
Yeah.
the search for answers continues.
Mm.
Natalie's determination, the ongoing media attention, and the online communities dedicated to this case
Mm-hmm.
all contribute to keeping Phoebe's memory alive
Yeah.
and the hope for justice burning bright.
It really highlights how important, public awareness is
Absolutely,
in cases like this.
Yeah.
The continued discussion and scrutiny
Mm-hmm.
can help ensure that those in power remain accountable
Right.
and that these cases don't simply just fade away with time.
Public pressure can be a powerful tool for justice.
Absolutely.
It can force authorities to re-examine evidence,
Yeah.
explore new leads,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately prevent cases like Phoebe's from being forgotten.
So we come back to this question that has just loomed over this case for more than a decade.
Yeah.
Was Phoebe Handsjuk's death a tragic accident fueled by intoxication and poor judgment? Or was there something more sinister at play?
The evidence points to a complex and unsettling scenario.
Mm-hmm.
We have the blood trail,
Right.
the unusual and conflicting injuries, the lack of CCTV footage,
Yeah.
and that haunting text message to her mother.
Right.
These pieces don't fit neatly into the narrative of a simple accident.
It's almost as if we're being challenged to look beyond the surface, to dig deeper,
Right.
to question everything we think we know.
Exactly, and that's what makes this case so significant.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that things aren't always as they seem,
Mm-hmm.
and that the pursuit of truth can be a long and arduous journey, but one worth taking.
Absolutely. And it's a journey that Phoebe's mother, Natalie, has been on for years.
Right.
And it's a journey that we, as engaged citizens, can participate in by continuing to ask questions, examine the evidence,
Right.
and demand answers.
Remember, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, the truth has a way of emerging.
Yeah.
It might take time,
Mm.
it might take persistence,
Yeah.
but the pursuit of justice should never be abandoned.
This case truly exemplifies the power of one person's dedication to uncovering the truth.
Absolutely.
Natalie's unwavering commitment to finding out what happened to her daughter is inspiring and just a reminder that we all have a role to play in seeking justice.
Absolutely. And that's what we hope you take away from this deep dive. A renewed sense of curiosity, a commitment to critical thinking, and the understanding that even the most complex cases can be unraveled with persistence and a willingness to look beyond the surface.
It's that pursuit of truth that brings us back to, the most haunting question of all, right? If Phoebe didn't climb into that chute herself,
Yeah.
how does she end up there? What could have happened in that apartment in those final hours?
It's a chilling scenario to think about,
Yeah.
but one we can't shy away from.
Yeah.
We have to examine the possibility
Oh,
that
that's what-
someone else was involved.
Right.
Was there a struggle? Was evidence tampered with?
Yeah.
Was Phoebe's death deliberately staged to look like an accident?
What gets me is just how much we don't know.
Right.
The lack of CCTV footage from those crucial areas of the building,
Right.
it's a huge gap in the investigation.
Huge.
What happened in those hallways? Did anyone see Phoebe that night?
Imagine you're an investigator on this case. You're faced with these pieces of evidence that don't quite fit, a family that's desperately seeking answers,
Right.
and a public that is demanding justice.
Yeah.
The pressure would be immense.
It makes you wonder if there were just missed opportunities during the initial investigation.
Yeah.
Maybe some leads weren't fully explored, or maybe certain assumptions were just made way too quickly.
It's important to remember that investigations are only as good as the information available at the time.
Right.
Sometimes, crucial details emerge later, or witnesses come forward,
Yeah.
or new forensic techniques become available.
And that's why cases like this often remain open even years later, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
there's always a chance that new evidence could come to light, or that someone with really crucial information might finally decide to speak up.
It's the power of public interest and just continued discussion.
Right.
It keeps the pressure on. It ensures that these cases aren't forgotten
Absolutely.
and that the pursuit of justice doesn't wane.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into this really unsettling case of Phoebe Handsjuk, we're left with more questions than answers.
Right.
But I think that's kind of the point.
I think so too.
It challenges us to think critically, to look beyond the surface,
Absolutely.
and just to never stop seeking the truth.
Exactly. Phoebe's story is a reminder that the pursuit of justice is often a long and winding road.
It is.
But it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely.
And it's a journey that doesn't end with just a single verdict or a coroner's report.
Right.
It continues in the hearts and minds of those who refuse to let the truth be silenced.
So what do you think happened that night? Was Phoebe's death just a tragic accident, or was it something more? We encourage you to keep digging into this, explore the evidence, and form your own conclusions.
You know, never underestimate the power of just asking questions, challenging assumptions, and demanding answers.
Yeah.
Phoebe's case, with all its complexities and uncertainties, remains just a powerful testament to the importance of seeking justice and never giving up hope, even in the face of the unknown.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unsettling and unresolved case of Phoebe Handsjuk. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop seeking the truth.